Hi, and welcome to today's live chapter reading of Two Hearts, One Stone by Leslie Scott, brought to you by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. There. Chapter 1. Angry women can be tenacious creatures. Mostly for Stone Dempsey, they were beautiful, succulent, amazing beings in whose bodies he could seek 1,000 pleasures. You washed up, low-life piece of shit, how dare you? Occasionally, though, one would find another's lacy black fog bun beneath his bed, cling to that betrayal as if her life depended on it. I don't ask for much, Stone. I won't be made a laughing-stock at the country club. The Tasmanian devil in his small cabin was snatching up what was left of her clothes as if the floor itself were government quarantine. Becca, baby, just wait. I can mix. She jerked away in a flurry of long red hair and silk underthings before yanking on a pair of designer skinny jeans. Chagrined, Stone gave chase, hoping into faded denim as she snatched her jangling bracelets from his coffee table. Turns out those things could be linked together over the top of Becca's head. He had a lot of fun with that. The spunky ginger with a dash of freckles on her nose wasn't as stuffy when her nosy friends were around. He enjoyed her, which was why he was trying to make amends. Who wanted the good times to stop? The worst part? With anger firing in her eyes and a trembling hand, she shook the panties in his face. I know who these belong to. I was there when my best friend J.C. McGuire bought them. To excite her husband, for God's sake, Stone. Not so much of a good time. J.C. had neglected to mention a husband. Not so much of oh, well, she didn't tell me about either of you, darling. He flashed his best pleasure smile. Her silk-covered palm cracked across his jaw with an ear-splitting racket, instinct to match. Well, I hadn't expected that, not that it was the first time he'd been slapped. And with what could be called a vain attempt at modesty, Ashley tugging a skimpy blouse over herself, redhead Rebecca stormed off. He followed her to the door, if nothing more than to watch her ass bounce as she expertly maneuvered over the gravel drive in her foreign heels and tucked herself into her tiny fort. Fuck you, Stone Dempsey, and all the horses you rode in on. In a flurry of spinning tires and rocks, the ginger whirling dervish tore out of there as if on fire. As long as a long, slow clap drew Stone's attention westward, forcing him to squint and shield his eyes with his palms. Quite the show, son. Though I'm betting you know where riding more than one horse at a time will get you. The deep rumbling voice of Smoky Mountain, reining horses over Howard Pool greeted them with good humor. Boss man was a cat for a southern gentleman. Stone plucked the thong under Mercury's shoulder with his free hand, tossed it back into the house. Yeah, well, I won't be fishing in that pond again. A shadowed form beside the old man, backlit by the setting sun, gave a lyrical feminine laugh, and Stone's heart rate increased. It was the sort of sound a guy like him wanted to turn husky and dark and unwitting challenge, slightly pretentious and completely sexy. Maybe try for a new sport and give the pool a rest before your life breaks. Never said the amenable presence of the old man scoffed. Jesus, you kiss your mama with that mouth. Pop, seriously, the way you two were bandying about, I think I was fairly appropriate. The bearer of the dulcet voice came into view beneath the shadow of the small cabin. He quite simply stole the air from his lungs. Redhead Rebecca had been red hot, but didn't hold a candle to the woman standing before him, tall, maybe a few inches shy of the 6 feet, a mass of curly auburn hair, bow tie mouth, huge beguiling hazel eyes, his heart in a stutter step before bouncing up and down like a bucking stud horse. In cartoons, his tongue would have dropped to the ground and his eyes popped from his head. Shifting his weight and stepping from the doorway, unbuttoned jeans slung low on his hips. Stone turned on every bit of charm he had, and you would be down, boy, boss man growled, his gaze menacing beneath the brim of his dusky colored hat. Dr. Emerson Cole, she bobbed her head once with a affable smile, but glanced dubiously from his extended hand when he offered it to the Panties Lane just beyond his doorway. With a shrug and a grin, he shoved both hands into his back pockets, thumbs out. My granddaughter Emmy, the old man admitted, fresh from Atlanta, opened up a small pediatrician's office here and will be staying with me a while. Stone rolled up his animated tongue and visibly deflated. The only thing worse than the boss's daughter was the boss's granddaughter. In an instant, he forgot his disappointment and remembered something else entirely. The Emmy Cole Junior World Champion on Doggone Done It Again. For a reigning horse trainer, she was royalty. She blushed in a way that was somehow adorable and sexy. Indeed, do you still ride? He ignored her grandfather's glare of disapproval and hopped off the tiny porch. If Stone had been wearing a hat, he'd have taken it off, but he stopped short of bowing at her feet. He'd seen her ride the year she'd won. It had been like watching a work of art, for fun, but not in years. Though her voice had softened slightly, he could tell a quick tongue and quicker bit hid behind the mask of uniform. He liked her, not for sex either. She'd skyrocketed straight out of that stratosphere and into another. When the old man stepped away to answer his ring, Stone took advantage of the opportunity. Want to see the horses? Your grandfather has amazing stock. I got a few that could win. One's a stallion, planning on getting some cash behind his name. Maybe stud him out. She laughed again, a melodious, wonderful sound, and he fought the urge to adjust his cock. With a wink, she glanced down to his tightening groin and back up to his face. Maybe you should get dressed first. I'll see you around. She pivoted and stopped long enough to place a kiss on the older man's weathered cheek. Love you, Pop. And if he'd thought his red-headed one-night stand looked good walking away, Emmy was damn near breathtaking. Spending the rest of her fledgling practice opening day battling back fantasies of a half-dressed Stone Dipsy had soured Emmy's mood. Enough so, even Pop's famous meatloaf couldn't wrench her out of the funk. You're barely eating, kid, he gestured at the untouched food she pushed around on her plate. I don't cook a meal like this for just anybody. A grin twisted the corners of her mouth. Sure you do. You love to cook. If there is someone there who will wash the dishes, you'll make dinner for anyone. She wasn't. She'd spent every summer of her childhood with mother too. Howard Cole had taught her to tie a slip knot, ride a horse, drive a manual transmission, and how to cook. If Pop wasn't in the barn, he was in the kitchen. Food was probably the only thing he loved more than horses, well, and her, of course. What's on your mind? You'll feel better once you unload. He shoveled another full of meatloaf into his mouth and raised a frown. Of all the trainers in the state of Georgia, you go and hire the biggest man for it ever lived. A gorgeous one at that, more than 6 feet of lean, corded muscle, topped with dark, golden hair that looked especially sexy and test. Why did the really attractive ones have to know the effect they had on women? Pop coughed, covered his mouth, choking on the bite he'd been swallowing. He finally cleared his throat, his eyes watering. She met his gaze with a pointed stare. The years of med school, sleepless nights, and internship didn't mean she hadn't kept up with the sport she loved so much. Stone Dempsey was well known in the world of quarter horses as Hollywood done it and had probably studied himself out just as many times. After a silent moment, grunted, wiped his mouth with his napkin. I wasn't too concerned with his personal life when I hired him. You were off living your life. My trainer retired. I needed a new one. There was no reason she should be annoyed with her grandfather. Dipsy was a well-respected trainer. Then again, in a world where your name was your brand, though, he might not have been the wisest choice. Pop, he cut her off before she could argue, tossing his fork with a clank onto the plate. Emmy, don't you pop me. You found your calling. You're a damn fine doctor. I've seen what stone can do. The stock can produce the stock he can produce will put this farm firmly into the black before I die. Don't be dramatic. You're not dying. But I ain't getting no younger. Stone Dempsey is the best damn horse trainer I've ever seen. I don't give two shits where he casts his fishing line. That had been that. Emmy couldn't explain to her grandfather the sight of the renowned horse trainer, shirtless, disheveled, grinning like it Snowden hell had stolen the wet from her mouth and placed it elsewhere. So she grasped at the tendrils of what had once been her innocence and sought solace in the giant stable behind his home. The building, built of weathered wood with rustic trappings, was Pop's pride and joy. She didn't. She needed to count to know there were 15 stalls on either side, and at the other end of the packed earth centered column there would be two bath stalls to her left and a large tack room to her right. When everything in her life needed to be sterile and clean, the scent of fresh hay and horses beckoned her home with its contrast. Delighted whinings from the occupied stalls greeted her, and she rubbed the nose of each head stuck over a door. At the end of the long corridor, the barn opened to the splendor of Northwest Georgia's pine, a piece of the Smokies. The orange glow of the sun had begun its descent behind the pine-covered mountain tops, cast the arena beyond the stable into twilight. Not much illumination was needed to draw her gaze to the man's astride a pretty bay mare, with the well-polished grace of a true horseman. Stone guided the horse in a series of pivots and spins that made Emmy delightfully dizzy. Once finished with the pattern, his voice echoed through the little valley. You'll have to stop looking at me like that, sweetheart, or I'm gonna forget you're the boss's granddaughter. Like hell he was.